You don't have to feel self-conscious about computer problems because everyone has them. All right. And that doesn't seem to be starting. Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to give it just a brief second for everybody to come in. My name is Terry Ball, and I am the Grants Manager for Californians for the Arts. We are excited to have you all here today. While we're getting set up, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, putting your name, your affiliation, and your land acknowledgement, we will get ready in just a second. All right. Just want to open up some links to share with you all. Okay, we have a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and start. And I'm going to start by apologizing for the fact that I'm having some technology challenges this morning. For one, my camera has decided not to work. So unfortunately, you just have me in the black void, but that's okay because it's really the screen that you want to see, not my smiling face. The other, I'm having a little issue right now opening my document with all of the links. So we will put links into the chat, including the link for the Californians for the Arts and also my email. Okay, so just some housekeeping at the very beginning. Please put any questions that you have in the Q&A, and let's keep the chat for your introductions and that kind of thing. What we will do at the end is we're going to go through and hit as many questions as we possibly can. And if those are all in the Q&A, then we make sure we get them as opposed to having to sort through the chat. You will receive a link afterwards to a recording of the webinar. There are also recordings of all of the previous webinars. You'll get a link to this slide deck, and I'll create a transcript of the Q&A. So you will get all of those things afterwards. So don't feel like you have to record every moment of what we're about to go through. So we are this morning joined by Californians for the Arts, NEVA California, one of our partners in this endeavor, and also Cal Nonprofits, our other partner in this. Just to start out by making sure everybody knows who everyone is. And then we'll finish with the introductions. The California Venues Grant is the result of legislation that's passed and signed at the top levels of government. That legislation came of the state government, obviously. This legislation came into being because of advocacy from groups like Californians for the Arts, Californians Arts Advocates, NEVA California, and Cal Nonprofits. Without these organizations, this bill would not be here, this grant program would not be here, and we would not be here to help you with it. So all three of these organizations are member organizations. I encourage you to learn more about all three of them. NEVA California and Californians for the Arts are here to support the entire creative sector. Not just, NEVA California isn't just for-profit venues, and Californians for the Arts and Californian Arts Advocates aren't just nonprofit venues. So for all of the nonprofits, definitely check out Cal Nonprofits. For NEVA California and Californians for the Arts, I encourage everybody here to go and learn about these organizations because they are both working hard on your behalf. And the only way either one exists is through memberships. So that's enough of that commercial. The path of this bill or of this grant program, I'm sorry, I'm a little rattled this morning because of all of these computer problems. I'm going to take a deep breath and we're all going to begin. When the law goes into effect, then there's a government agency, in this case, Cal OSBA, that takes over and administers the program. They then contract with Lindustry to deliver the program. Lindustry reaches out to Cal Nonprofits, Californians for the Arts, and NEVA California to help be a bridge to the industry, to help with communication, offer technical support, and assistance to make sure everybody knows about the grant, and then that you have somebody there to help you in addition to the call centers and offering of support. As we all know, our industry is a little different than a lot of other industries. And so Lindustry is wisely reaches out to have people who know the industry to be here to help you with the translation and understanding between the two. I like to go through all of that, not because I think you need a civics lesson, but because there are lots of different moving parts and lots of different entities involved in here. And I want you to have a rough idea before we dive in. Okay, we can go to the next slide. As we are going, the importance of this slide is to let you know, as I said before, none of these kinds of programs and support happens without advocacy. Your voice is strong, your voice is important, and I encourage you once more to reach out to these three groups who can help amplify the voice. So next, in the webinar today, what we're going to do is there's a tremendous amount of information here. I'm not going to read it all to you. I'm not going to go over in detail every single slide. I, however, encourage you before you submit your application to do so, to read all of the pages, to look in depth. There's a lot of examples that will show you the exact pages that you're going to encounter in the application period. It's going to seem overwhelming as we go through it today because I'm going to go fast because there's a lot of information. It's not. And if you prepare yourself and take a little bit of time before you sit down for the application should take you 30 minutes or less, excuse me, and it should not be difficult. You know, as with any computer system, there may be quirks along there, but this is not a difficult application process. It is a precise application process. All right, I think we have now covered the most important thing. If you leave here with nothing else, leave here today with my email address, which is grantsmanager@californiansforthearts.org. And then we also will have links for the program pages. But any questions you have when you're putting in your application, as you're going through the process, once you put in your application and you're going through the review process, please, if you have questions, concerns, quandaries, shoot me an email. There's also a phone number that will be provided at the end. You are welcome to call me. The only thing I can tell you is email tends to be more efficient. Number one, I can answer emails when I'm doing other things, like sitting in other meetings. And I also can reply to emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. And most people don't like it if I reply to phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. So the other great thing about sending questions and concerns by email instead of in person is I can then read all of the details. If I need to gather information to answer your question, to provide you, I can do that and then send you back an email that has instructions that you can refer to. And that way you're not trying, as we're talking on the phone, to write down all of the details of what I'm telling you. You have a record right there. So there really is a method to my madness of encouraging you to go email instead of phone call. If you need to call me, please absolutely do. The number is there. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you. Okay, next. Okay, the important things to know, the application portal is open now and it will close on January 31st at 5 o'clock. It is not open through midnight. So January 31st, which is Tuesday at 5 p.m. This is a computer process. Do not wait until 4 o'clock to start your grant. I would suggest, doing it at the very least earlier in the day, if not getting it in on Monday, only because computers are computers. And I don't know about yours, but mine know when I'm in a hurry, know when something is important or there is a deadline. And that is when they are most likely to act up. So if you at all can, I would give yourself a little bit of cushion there at the end. Second, very important thing, if you applied for the original round of the California Venues Grant, you are not eligible to apply for this round. Not if you were granted, you aren't eligible, but if you applied. So if you were declined in the first round, or if you have an application that was started and you don't know what the resolution was, do not start a new application. Email me or call the call center and say, I was declined and I would like to be reconsidered. I don't know what happened. Can I get an update? But don't start a new application. This is really just an extension of the same venues program. As you may know, when the program originally launched, as I said, this program is based on legislation, which means, unlike a foundation or other organization that might put out a grant, if there's something that is a problem that, we thought it would work this way, but it's working out slightly different, you can't just change the way the program is midstream. You have to actually go back and pass new legislation. This happened last year when we first started processing this application, and there had to be some legislation that helped make the program more what it was originally intended to be. And so once that happened and changed some of the basic eligibility factors, Lindustry went back in and tried to review all of the applications again. Anybody that had been put on hold or been declined, they looked at again with the new eligibility requirements. And unfortunately, as is always the case, and particularly because it had been many months in this case, some of those communications back and forth didn't happen. So some people didn't get the communication that your grant could be reviewed, needed to be reviewed. So if you were declined or you just don't know, again, one more time, I can't say this strongly enough, don't start a new application. It will only make things more difficult in trying to get things cleaned up and possibly reconsidered. There were some big things that changed. A number of new NAICS codes were added, and something that's impacting a lot of people, the threshold for loss was changed. So we'll go through those, but I can't say strongly enough, if you're in doubt, check, don't just apply. Okay, next. All right, so the grant that we're talking about today, to make sure you're in the right classroom, is the California Venues Grant Program. It is designed to support eligible independent live events and event venues that have been affected by COVID-19. So that's important to know. This is a COVID relief grant. So this is not grant funding for you if you want to start a new series of plays, if you want to build a new building, and start new programming. This funding is specifically tied back to COVID relief. The grant award will be the lesser of either $250,000 or 20% of the applicant's gross earned revenue in the California 2019 taxable year. So I'm going to stop on this for a minute because there's a couple of important things here. Number one, your entity that is applying must be someone that files its own tax form. If you are part of a university, if you are part of a government entity or some other larger company that files a group tax form and you are just a program within it, then you cannot apply for this program. You have to be an entity that files its own taxes because there are a number of the eligibility factors that go back to that tax. So the revenue that they're looking for here for the grant award is based on your 2019 tax year. For those of you that are on a fiscal year, that's your 2019 fiscal year, whatever that is for your company, That's what the grant award will be based on. I realize in some cases that is off because of when COVID hit, but the legislation says 2019 taxable year, and that's what it is. It is your gross revenue as gross earned revenue as reflected on that tax form. The program prioritization is based on the loss experienced from calendar year 2019 to calendar year 2020 for quarters 2, 3, 4 in each of those years. So the order in which the grants will be reviewed, and also one of the eligibility requirements, is not based on your fiscal year if you're a fiscal year, and is not based on your total year as reflected on your taxes. It is based on the actual calendar year, quarters 2 through 4 of 2019, compared to quarters 2 through 4 of 2020. So basically, the COVID period of 2020, we're going to compare that to your regular period of 2019. You're not going to look at Q1 in either year. For this, if you're on a fiscal year, you're going to provide profit and loss statements for those quarters in your calendar year, regardless of what your fiscal year is. So in this case, where they're looking at the actual loss, they do want to be comparing apples to apples for everybody and put everybody on the same time frame. Okay, so I know that with all the different years and the taxes, it can get confusing. That's why I like to really slow down in this part. All right, next. To the application process. You're going to fill out your application. There are a number of eligibility factors. This is not like some grants where there's a lot of narrative or anything like that. It's some simple questions and several documents, and we'll go over all of that here. Okay, next. One more thing to keep in mind in terms of the award is that if you received a California Relief Grant, which is the very first set of grant programs that the state did at the beginning of 2011, if you received one of those grants, and there were several rounds, then the amount of that grant will be deducted from the amount of your venues grant. So if your venues grant is going to be $100,000 and you received a $20,000 California Relief Grant, your actual award will be $80,000, not $100,000. Okay, next. So there's really two factors here. We've got live event venues and we've got live events. And there are eligibility factors related to both. You do not have to be both things. You don't have to own a venue and do performances. If you are and you run an eligible venue that meets these factors we're going to go over, then you can be fine as long as eligible events take place in your venue. If you don't own and operate your own venue, but you are a producer of live events, promoter, we're going to go over all of those, but you put on the events, then you don't have to have your own facility. One of your eligibility requirements is your events have to take place in an eligible venue. It might be that you perform in 4 different eligible venues throughout the year. That's fine. You just have to perform in an eligible venue, and the events have to meet those criteria. Okay, so for the venue, read through these details. The big things are that one of the things that gets confusing for people is in these roles. You have to have at least one person that does at least 2 of these functions: sound engineer, booker, promoter, stage manager, security personnel, and a box office manager. It can be a volunteer as opposed to paid staff. They don't have to be full-time, but each of these roles have to take place at the venue by at least one individual. You also have to have a defined performance and audience space. There are mixing equipment issues. And one of the eligibility requirements here, which gets a little confusing for people, for a venue owned or operated by a nonprofit entity that produces free events, The events are produced and managed primarily by paid employees, not by volunteers. Which, where this gets confusing is you still have to have eligible events that take place in the venue. And for all of the eligible events, one of the requirements is that there's a charge for the events. So unfortunately, though you are okay as the venue, if the events are free, you aren't in terms of the events themselves. So this is one of those little strange things when you're passing laws. Okay, so moving on to the next. Now we're going to look at the requirements for what the events have to follow. The first is there's a number of types of government entities, or not government entities, a number of types of organizations that you can be that are listed here. Again, the shorthand is if you don't file your own taxes, if you are underneath something else, some other organization that files your taxes as part of it, then you won't be able to be eligible. You have to be able to provide your 2019 and 20 tax returns. One of the first eligibility requirements is there are a list of NAICS codes and NTEE codes, and your organization on its 2019 or 2020 taxes has to have used one of these NAICS codes. For nonprofits, you have to have a specific NTEE code listed in GuideStar in order to be eligible. Simply having that doesn't make you eligible, but you must have it in order to be eligible. And part of the challenge with the NAICS code portion is the IRS in their electronic tax system doesn't allow you to enter every possible NAICS code in the system, because NAICS codes are kind of like nesting dolls. You'll have with each digit, it makes it a different category. And unfortunately, in some cases, like the first two NAICS codes listed here, the 512131 and 512132, the IRS system only allows you to select 512130, which is a NAICS code that encompasses both of these. But you have to have one of these exact NAICS codes on your taxes. So this can create some issues. If you find that the NAICS code on your taxes does not match exactly one of these NAICS codes, either because it is one of those situations where they take a similar code but not the exact code, or because NAICS numbers are self-identified. For many people, they have issues. They have issues where they had a strange NAICS code years ago that their accountant assigned, and they've never changed it. If you believe that you're eligible and the only issue you have is that you have a mistake in the NAICS code that is on your taxes, then there is a system that Lindustry has come up with where you can amend your returns. Email me and I can send you those steps. They're very specific steps. You only have to have documentation that you have submitted the amended return. You do not have to have completed and received confirmation, that receive the final information back from the IRS. If you need to do an amended return and can't get that completed before the application deadline, you can go ahead and submit your current taxes. And I would include a note that says we're in the process of amending and can submit our amended return as soon as it is ready. So if you're in that situation, contact me. I don't want to go into the whole steps here because I want to cover everything else. So this first page and the next page, if you can go on to the next, Eddie, the first list is the NAICS codes. That's what's going to be for-profit businesses. For not-for-profits, there's a list here of NTE codes, and you can find your NTE codes on GuideStar online because not all nonprofits put a NAICS code on their tax forms. If you go looking for your NAICS code and you can't find it on your tax forms, it's listed as a business code. Okay, so let's move on from the dreaded NAICS codes. And this is just a record for you of that other page was the amended tax return instructions. So those are in the slide deck, even though we're not going to go over them bit by bit. Now, this is the next piece of the eligibility for live event venues. You do not have to match every single bullet point on this page. You do have to match all of one of the three. So we've got the three that have the black bullets, and then there's bullets underneath them. You have to either meet all of the first one, all of the second one, or all of the third one. The big things in all three scenarios are your event has to take place in an eligible venue. The performers must be paid. Not every performer on stage, but there must be performers that are paid. And there has to be some sort of entrance fee. In one factor, in one group, the additional factor is that you have to have your tickets available to the public at least 30 days in advance. And in the first group, the other factor is that at least 70% of the earned revenue has to be generated through cover charges, ticket sales, production fees, and other things related to events. Now, in all three of these, your primary business has to be these live events. However you're involved in them, this has to be your primary business. If you are a restaurant, if you are a school, if you are a studio, that is your main business. I'm a restaurant, and once a year we do a paid performance where we, pay performers to come in, we charge admission, then you are not eligible. If you are a restaurant or a studio or a school where your main thing is that you do performances, and in addition to your performances, like some theaters also will offer a teaching workshop, an acting class. But their main thing that they're doing is being a theater and putting on productions. If your main thing is that you're putting on the productions, then you're eligible. The main focus is your teaching or your restaurant business, then you will end up not being eligible. So for everybody, you want to think about this 70% of your income coming from the event income, because that's how you're going to prove that that's your principal business. Okay, next. There's another category of the things that make you ineligible. This is a very long list. Double check all of them because they're all very important. I'm just not going to go through them piece by piece. The two important ones that I am going to cover, because these get a little confusing, is you have to generate at least 75% of your gross earned revenue in California. You cannot be primarily based outside of the state. The other eligibility factor is that you have to have at least a 30% revenue decline from 2019 to 2020 in those specific quarters that we talked about before, or at least in one of those quarters. So your 30% loss can either be that entire period, Q2 through Q4 of 2020 compared to 2019, or it can be a single one of those quarters compared to the same quarter in the other year. So again, if you're on a fiscal year, this is your calendar year. For these factors here, you are looking for the calendar year of 2019 to 2020, regardless of what your fiscal year is. All right, next. This is just more of the ineligibility factors. The other, as we go on to the next page, if you own multiple businesses, or if you're a board officer at more than one not-for-profit, only one business that you are an owner of, or that you are an officer for, only one of those can get a grant. So if you happen to be, I'm a part-time executive director for this group and for this group, only one of those two groups can apply. If you happen to be a partner in 3 or 4 different businesses, only one of those businesses that you're a partner in can apply and get a grant. The state knew that they didn't necessarily have enough funds to cover everyone, and so they did put in some of these limitations. I just want to remind everybody to please put questions into the chat, into the Q&A, not the chat, because we won't necessarily get to them in the chat. All right, next. Okay, required documents. This is a big point of issue, and this is the parts that you want to prepare beforehand. So you don't have to be doing this as you're going through the application. The first one is the application certification. You're going to go to the program website, which will be here on the slide deck that you can go to, and down underneath the required documents portion of the website, you're going to find an application certification to download. There is one for for-profits, and there is a different one for not-for-profits. Make sure you download the correct one, read it. You have to initial a bunch of things and sign some things. So make sure that you read that entire document and know what you're attesting to, because you don't want to lie to the government. Business financials. These are your tax returns, 2019, 2020, California and federal, the complete returns, not just the first page, not summarized returns, the complete returns for all 4 of those. Government issued ID. You want to take a picture of the front and back of your driver's license and or passport. This will be for the signer of the grant. To be the signer, you have to be either the owner of the business, or in either the for-profit or nonprofit situation, you have to be an officer that is listed on your statement of information with the Secretary of State of California. Go and look and double check and make sure your officers are accurate on your statement of information, and that whoever is the signer on this application is on that statement of information. Don't just assume that your executive director or the person that runs the business. It has to be the signer. It has to be someone who's listed on that statement of information. When you're providing this government ID, make sure it's clear and legible. That should be true for all documents that you submit, but in particular this ID, because the state has to do everything it can to prevent fraud, the picture on that ID is for the signer, and that person has to sit in front of the camera of the computer at one point in the application process, and they have to be able to compare and see that the ID provided is for the person sitting in front of the camera. The interim financials, which is separate from your business financials, the interim financials, these are profit and loss statements for calendar year 2019. The way they want these prepared, because they can look at you both on a quarter and all those, so the full 3-quarter period, you're going to prepare a profit and loss for Q2, one for Q3, and one for Q4, and they're going to put all together in one PDF. And then you're going to do the same thing for 2020. Each individual profit and loss statement, and then all together in one PDF. Then you have to have something that is filed officially with either the California Secretary of State, or if you're a sole proprietor with your local municipality. Any of these documents listed here, you don't have to have all of them. You have to have one of them, because it has to prove that you were in existence prior to June 1st of 2019, because that is one of the overall eligibility requirements. Excuse me. For nonprofits, you're going to provide your most recent, or an IRS, your tax exempt letter. There is a spot on the application now that asks for a board resolution. The board resolution is not required. You do not have to have one when you first apply. There are times that people need to appoint a certain person to be the interaction, and with Lindustry, there might be a reason that, you know, the person that you originally started and was your signer has now fallen ill, left the company, something like that. So sometimes it requires a board resolution for Lindustry to be able to change the person. Do not worry about the board resolution when you are first applying, because it is not a required document. You want to check and make sure that you are in good standing with the California Secretary of State. There is a website where you can go to look that up, search your status for nonprofits. You also want to search your status with the Registry of Charitable Trusts. If you don't know how to do either of those things, email me and I can, you know, send you the link. But Lindustry can't award you a grant if you are not in good standing with both of those entities. So everybody check your Secretary of State, nonprofits check your registry. The registry in particular is very time consuming to get cleaned up if there is an issue there. So double check that, because Lindustry will do that as part of the review process. Okay, next. Okay, this is just going to walk you through in great detail how to download and sign the application certification. So Eddie, you can go through all of those pages. You can download it, sign it, and scan it, or you can sign it online. You can keep going. But this just gives you in great detail how to do that. And then it's going to show you examples of all of the required documents. We're not going to stop and go over all of these, but you can, in case you have any questions about, excuse me, which document is. And these are, we're going to just keep continuing with that. Your articles of incorporation, your business license. There's the nonprofit letter. Okay, here it talks about reviewing your NAICS code. This is not a situation where you want to go and look up and decide what you think is a good NAICS code. What you want to do is look at your 2019 and 2020 tax returns. It has to be the number that is on that tax return. Okay, next. Now there's a bunch of tips in here on how to make your computer interaction better. I'm not going to go through all of those tips. I strongly encourage you to. I can tell you that many of the people that I talk to who have technical problems with the submission of the grant, it's because they didn't follow these tips. One really important one is make sure that your email address that you use is a valid one. For some reason, the system does not like info at. Obviously, it wouldn't want at contact at non-reply, those kinds of things, but you don't want to start with info. So make sure you have a good email. And make sure that the phone that you use to set up your account is a cell phone and one that you have access to. Every time you go to get into the portal, to submit anything, to check, it's going to send you a code to that cell phone. So don't use some cell phone of a board member or a staff member that's about to be gone for 6 months and not have access to their cell phone. That cell phone and that email address needs to be ones that are monitored and can be interacted with. At the end of the process, one of the things that's going to happen if you get that far is Lindustry is going to need to get on the phone with the signer for the account to do some final ID verification. And so it needs to be an email and a phone number that you have constant access to, because this is how they will contact you. And when they contact you, if they don't hear back from you, they're going to try a couple of times, but they're not going to try forever. This is a time where you want to, for the next several months, until you're through the process, watch your email closely, watch your phone. If you're the kind of person where your voicemail box gets full quickly, make sure you clean it out. If you, because you don't want to be missing those calls. If you don't normally answer from numbers that you don't recognize, now might be a good time to take an exception to that, because it's a lot easier to answer the call when they first call you than to have to get back a hold of them. All right, so we're going to take just a moment here. There's a lot of the questions in this application process that are going to feel uncomfortable. They're going to ask for your personal address. They're going to ask for the signer's personal social security number. one of the big things that the government, that the state has to worry about, and that Lindustry is appointed to worry about, is that these grants aren't going to fraudulent people. We've all seen the news coverage after these various grant programs of, somebody making up 1,500 different fake businesses and applying and collecting a bunch of fraudulent money. It is absolutely imperative for the state that this is taxpayer money, that they do everything they possibly can to make sure these grants are going to the incredibly worthy people that need it and not to a bunch of fraudulent people. I would love to say that we live in a world where this is an overreaction and is unnecessary, but unfortunately, all of us know that's not where we live. These extra measures and these precautions are necessary. I also understand that we're all concerned on our own personal levels and for our businesses about identity fraud and being scammed and protecting our banking information. This is one of those places where unfortunately we've got to learn to live together, and it's going to be uncomfortable for you and it's important. And so just understand they're not asking for these things because they're trying to scam you in some way. They're not asking for these things because they're trying to just be irritating. That it is for very good reason that these precautions are here. And we all want to make sure that the money goes to those of you who really deserve it and not to the scams. So try to be patient and understanding through that portion of the process. All right, let's keep going. All right, this is gonna, you can keep going, Eddie. They're gonna show you here the various documents for, you can, stop here at persona. The best practices, how big your PDFs can be. What I will say to you is, remember that the person on the, okay, can you go back one so we can show them the, oh no, you're right, keep going because we'll see persona later. It's in your best interest to make life as easy as possible for the reviewers who's going to review your grant. Each one of these grants, a person, actually multiple people, will sit down and go through the process and look at the documents. Make their life as easy as possible. If you're going to upload a PDF, check it before you send it. Make sure it's clear. Make sure it's easy to read so that they don't have to either come back to you and say, upload it again, which is only going to delay things, or they can't get the information off of it. Make them clear, make them legible, check them, label them, in a logical way. Okay, now these are more of the computer tips that we talked about before. So let's go through this. They're going to take you step by step. Big things to know: use Google Chrome as opposed to one of the other browsers. Clear your cache, use incognito mode, and disable pop-up blocker. For those of you who, like myself, those things were all very foreign when we started this process, read it. Okay, you can go to the next page, Eddie. Because now you'll see in these next coming pages, and you will get this slide deck, they're going to take you step by step, keep going, through how you do each of those things. You don't have to know what incognito mode is. You just read these instructions and it will tell you. Okay, keep going, keep going. All right, now we're going to show you pages from the actual application. A couple things to keep in mind before we start. Number one, you have to set up a new account. If you applied for other grant programs through Lindustry, you cannot use your old account. Don't go back there and try to log in. You need to go here and you're going to set up a new account. You can use the same email address, but you have to start a fresh account for this program. The other thing is that, as we said before, if you've already applied to this specific grant, do not set up a new account. Do not start a new application. Okay, next. This is going to show you step by step how to set up. Remember, the person that you identify as the officer has to be someone that's on your statement of information. All right, next. Okay, so the first page that you're going to fill out This is information about that officer, their name, their address, their social security number. The system does not accept PO boxes, and it is tied to a postal address database. Every once in a while, the database gets wacky, and if there's something strange in your address, sometimes it won't accept your address. You have to get an address in there. If it won't accept the residential address here, then you can go ahead and use the theater business or the company business address, and vice versa. So that, if for some reason it won't let you put in the residential address, then use, the business address or another address that is an identifiable address, and then you can update it during the review process. Okay, next. So the first page was about the signer, the owner, the officer. Now we're going to talk about your business, and all of these questions you're going to answer are about your business. Again, same things are true with the address. If you want to use the physical address, not a PO, and if you can't get the address to go in, then use the residential address and you can update it later. Next. Okay, a lot of these questions are actually demographic questions. Do not worry about the jobs questions. Don't worry about the number of employees. Answer as truthfully as possible for how you define these things for yourself. These are demographic questions. They will not be used in the eligibility. The primary use of the grant, select one of the things from the drop down. The amount requested, remember, is 20% of the 2019 gross earned revenue listed on your 2019 taxes. 20% of that. And then your annual gross receipts for 2019. Again, this has to match your tax form. Next. Everything on this page, other than the NAICS code questions, are again just demographic questions. Answer them to the best of your ability. They will not affect your eligibility. The NAICS code, this is where you want to fill in that eligible NAICS code from your taxes. If you are in the process of amending your tax return, select the NAICS code here that is the one you're amending to, not your current one, because if you put your current one in that you already know is wrong, then you're going to automatically get disqualified. Okay, next. And now they're going to ask you a bunch of questions related to the eligibility factors. Remember, you don't have to answer yes to every single one to still be qualified. There are some of these that get a little confusing. These are not supposed to be set up as auto declines for a no. If you answer no to, but there have been, I think it's all been fixed in the system because there were some auto declines going out on some of these. If you submit your application and you automatically get declined and you think it's wrong, send me an email and call the call center, and we can work to get you reconsidered. So somebody can really check. Either, so don't just get frustrated and walk away if you get an auto decline and you think it's wrong. Let's go on to the next. One of the things, if we have anybody here who is a movie theater operator, this can be slightly confusing because one of the questions is it's going to ask you if you have paid performers. In the view of the state, because there are paid actors in the films and you pay a licensing fee for the film, then yes, you can say that you have paid performers in your events. If you have any questions on that, email me. Understand, Lindustry wants to help you get through this process. They are very, very limited in what they can do because of the requirements of the eligibility. So you have to meet the eligibility factors exactly. But if you make a mistake on the grant and you get auto declined, they will review that and work with you to correct that if in fact, it was just that you made a mistake. So don't panic. Do know that they have limitations. They can't just waive things. But you can always get a review. Now, it's very important, again, to pay attention to this, because the quicker you address a situation, the easier it is for them to review it. Obviously, this process has to end at some point, so they can't just extend forever. Okay, let's keep going. We're running long. Okay, so this is the persona I was talking about. Read this very carefully. Your ID needs to be very clear. There are tips in here for ways to make it easier, because again, the ID and the person in front of the computer for the persona process needs to be the signer that is identified in this and is on your statement of information. Keep going. You're going to want to be in a well-lit area. So again, it's going to show you each of the screens. This is now the bank portion. In addition to the identity, this is the other uncomfortable. One of the fraud checks that Lendistry does is there is a third-party vendor called Plaid, and they're going to do checks on your bank account. Number one, this is how you will get paid. They do not issue physical checks. They issue direct deposit. But the other thing this does is make sure you are an actual business. So this third-party vendor, not the person you're talking to at Lendistry, will gain access to your account and verify it is an actual account with money coming and going. Now, not every bank is in the Plaid system. So for this, you're going to need your actual sign-in to your online banking, not just your routing and account number, but the actual sign-in. If you go in to do this process and your bank is not in the system, shoot me an email and we can give you steps for what you can do to address that situation. Because with both persona and the banking portion, you cannot proceed to complete the application until you finish these sections. All right, next. Okay, this is just all of your document upload instructions. Let's keep going. At the end, now, as you're going through, you can stop and check out and check back in, but you cannot go backwards. So if you realize, oh, now I understand what they were asking, I want to go back and change, you can't as you're going through. At the very end, the last thing that it's going to ask you before you submit is if you want to, you get the opportunity to go back through the entire application. And at that point, you can't edit and change anything that you did. So you're going to double check yourself, because once you hit submit, it becomes a much bigger deal to go in and edit things. You will not get some printout or PDF copy of the application. If you want to keep a record of the way you have answered the questions, then you need to take screenshots of each one as you go through. As soon as your application gets submitted, it's going to get an automatic check through the system. So you'll get an email that either says, unfortunately, you don't meet the eligibility requirements, which is the auto decline we've talked about, or you'll get one that says, great, you've been selected to move on. That does not mean you've been selected for the grant. It means you went through the first auto check system and that you're then moving on to the system, to the next stages. Those reviews are not going to start until the beginning of February. This is going to take some time. You are not going to hear about this grant by Valentine's Day. It's going to take a little while. All of the grants have to be reviewed individually. So don't start thinking, I'm absolutely going to get a grant and I'm going to have that by the end of February to pay bills. This is, anticipate that this will be a few month process. Okay, next. And this is just walking you through what I just said. So this is going to show you how it goes. We can keep going. Again, just because I'm going over these quickly doesn't mean you shouldn't go back and read them in detail. Okay, here's a lot of links to where you can go to get into the portal. Let's keep going. Yeah, go through the application page by page. Let's keep going. All right, there's the contact information at the end. And let's go to the chat. The Q&A. All right, I'm going to start with, please explain your definition of gross revenues versus earned revenues. Gross revenue is your total revenues from all sources. For not-for-profits is primarily where earned revenue comes in. For a not-for-profit, you have the money that you earn and you have money that is contributed. So earned revenue is the portion of your gross revenues that you actually earn from providing services, or inventory or whatever for your sales. Your contributed revenue is the other portion. So that's what it is. Gross is total, earned is the portion that is earned. Again, everybody, please put your questions into the Q&A, not in the chat. All right. So some of these questions that have already been answered, but we're going to go over. How do we go back a page in the application to correct or modify? You can do that at the end. You cannot do it as you go through the process. Is the grant for operational expenses for 2023 versus past years? This grant is specifically COVID relief. It is not operational for 2023. There are a list of specific eligible expenses. This can be, like with some of the other COVID relief, you can cover expenses that happened in the past, as long as those expenses haven't already been used for another grant, another government grant like SFOG or California Relief. There is no specific timeline. Most grants, you have from this date to this date to spend the money, and the money can be spent on expenses from this date to this date. There is not timelines like that. You can take as long as you want to spend this money. The other thing to know is there is not a formal reporting process at the end. You should keep a record of how you spend the money. You should keep invoices and receipts for up to 3 years, because the government can come back and say to you, hey, we want to know how you spend it. But there is not a closeout. There's not a reporting. There's not a budget report that you have to provide at the end. What if we ask for the incorrect amount of grant award? Will you correct it? Yes, they're not going to give you the money only based on what you write there. But you want to ask that as accurately as you can. If I got SFOG, does that make me ineligible? No, whether you got SFOG or not does not impact this in one way or the other. It doesn't make you eligible. It doesn't make you ineligible. The SFOG is a federal level grant, and this grant is a state level grant. What is also true is if you received a California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant, which is another grant program that's going on right now, those two programs are also unrelated. Having received one does not impact you. You can receive both of them without any problem. You can also apply for this if you receive the California Relief Grant. It's just that amount will be deducted. For the Cal Nonprofits Grant, the amounts won't be deducted either direction. Another thing to keep in mind is these funds for for-profit businesses are taxable income. You will receive a 1099 at the end of the year, and these are taxable on both the federal and state level. What are eligible COVID-related expenses? There are a bunch of expenses listed in the eligibility guide, including in the slide deck here. Where do we get the statement of information? Your statement of information is filed with the California Secretary of State. And there's a link in here, but if you Google California Secretary of State registry search, it will come up. It's very easy. The only thing you need to know is the legal business name, and it will search for you. And then also, if, for example, you can't find your founding documents, your articles of incorporation or something, they have copies there. They have copies of your statements of information that you can download as a PDF. Okay. What if we're a nonprofit, last year, who had a fiscal sponsor during the this program does not accept fiscally sponsored applications. So if you were a for-profit structure prior to in 2019, then you could apply. If you started out as a for-profit and you actually had filed with the Secretary of State and were incorporated in some way as a sole proprietor, then you can apply. If you had no legal structure prior to June 1st of 2019, then you will not be able to apply. You can shoot me an email if you have more. Our tax records were filed. Okay, so that's really the same thing with the fiscal sponsor. So no, if you didn't file any taxes in 2019, unfortunately, Dawn, you will not be eligible because the fiscal sponsor cannot apply for you for this program like they could for the nonprofit performing arts grant. Is this the same as Seeds Immigrant Rising? I would say no, because I don't know what Seeds Immigrant Rising is, but that sounds not like a performing arts grant. This grant, remember, is specifically for organizations where your primary business is being involved in the production, the promotion, the presentation of live events where tickets are charged and the performers get paid, live events and movie theaters. Can we look at the entire application before filling it out? Yes, because pictures of the entire application are in this slide book, in the slide deck, and also on the program website. So you can't look at it in the portal, but you can look at it on these other resources prior to starting the application. And I encourage you to do so. The more that you have all your documents ready and sitting there in front of you before you start, the easier it's going to be. Okay, we're right at time. I'm fine to stay and finish these last few questions, but I just want to say to everybody who might need to leave right at 11 o'clock, I'm already 2 minutes late. Thank you for coming. Don't be intimidated. This is not a difficult process. It's just a cumbersome and kind of long process. So be patient, take your time, go through and review everything and prepare yourself before you start. Know that the call center is there. Also, my email is here. And a thing to say about information from the call center. Everybody that works at Lindustry is trying very hard and wants to help you. But right now, there are numerous programs that Lindustry is running. And each of these programs has lots, as you can see, of fine points within it. And there are things that have changed about the programs as we have moved through. There are times that like with any system, every single person that is answering the phone is not always up to date on every single thing. So if you call and get information that seems strange to you, confusing, contradictory to something you've read, then shoot me an email and ask the question. Don't just get discouraged. You can also hang up and call again and try to ask a different operator. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about the call center at all. They're great people and there are wonderful people there. What I'm saying is there's a lot of details and a lot of moving parts. And sometimes it's hard to disseminate all of the information to every single person. So if you get confusing information, if you get something telling you no, absolutely you can't, that doesn't seem right, shoot me an email and double check. Thank you all for coming. Remember the three organizations that are making this possible, and good luck. You're going to do great, and I wish you all the best of luck with the program. Now, let's finish off these last few. We did that. I saw something about 75% must come from ticket sales, but like most theater companies, ticket sales is maybe 40% of income. Okay, Nicholas, this is where we go back to the question of earned income and contributed income. When you're looking at the threshold of 70% of your income has to come from live event related. For a not-for-profit, that's 70% of your earned revenue. It's not looking at your contributed revenue at all. So all of the money that's on your taxes under program revenue, and that's on your financial statements under earned revenue, is what you have to have 70% of that. And it's ticket sales, it's concessions, it's merchandise sales. If you rent your venue, it's those kinds of things. The point is, you can't be, like I mentioned before, say a restaurant who one time a year does an event. that doesn't make you eligible. You can be at a restaurant that has events all through the year and meets all that criteria. But you can't be one where the bulk of your income comes from non-event sales. Just like if you're a dance studio, the main thing you're doing is giving dance classes, and once a year you do a show where all of your students participate. That structure is not going to make you eligible for this grant because your primary business is as an instructional studio. It's not those 1 or 2 performances you do a year. Also, is this the same as, yes, Cal OSBA? How can I tell if your company applied or company applied already? Shoot me an email and we can put in an inquiry. Make sure you do that today, because at this point we're getting close to the wire in terms of having Lindustry look into that and get back to us. What if FB and fictitious business name before, like, but now? That's fine. As long as you have something to prove that you were in existence prior to June 1 of 2019. That's where the fictitious business name document comes into. You want some government document that proves you were in existence as this entity in June 1 of 2019. If you purchased the business after that, unfortunately, you are not eligible, because that was not your business, your taxes. That was another entity, iteration of the same business. I lose a lot of money. Teresa, maybe if you can send me an expansion on that question. But the important thing is, regardless of what your personal situation was, from those 3 quarters in 2019 to the 3 quarters in 2020, you have to have at least a 30% loss. Those are the kinds of things that there is no way around. Lindustry can't waive that. They can't change it. Oh man, I'm having trouble with the NAICS energy. For nonprofits, many of you don't list the NAICS code. It is not legally required on the 990. If you look yourself up in GuideStar, yes, what you want to do with GuideStar is you just worry about what's listed right now as your NTE code, because that's what Lindustry will look to verify. Student recital considered a valid production. No, a student recital is not going to be normally considered a valid production, especially unless there are some paid performers and it takes place in an eligible event. But the thing is, as a dance school and company, probably the bulk of your income is coming from tuition as opposed to those ticket sales. So in your particular case, Karashama, it would have to be that 70% of your income comes from the ticket sales to that recital as opposed to your tuition, because the tuition that everybody's paying to come to the dance school cannot be counted as income for meeting your 70% to make you eligible. The best thing to do, Nicholas, is just go ahead and shoot me an email and we can do that. Or if you want to just type your question in, then we can, I can stay and as we are now and answer that. Our 2 core programs have a live in-person event component. It is a component of the program, but not a program goal. Does that make us eligible? Gabriella, I would need more details. The things to look at, as I just mentioned, are what's your overall source of income? If you look at your whole pie of income, is your principal business putting on these events? For example, I had a tutoring, a youth education group contact me, who they do all kinds of tutoring services, and they were hoping to create an event to have awards for the tutoring students. But that one event a year is clearly not their principal business. The principal business is the tutoring service. So you're going to look at your business and say, can I honestly say that my principal business the main thing that I earn money from and the main reason that I'm here is these live events. If that's the case, then you're probably eligible. You know, all other things being considered. If that's not the case, if you know your principal business is unrelated to live events, then you're probably not eligible. L'Industrie always says, if you're on the fence and you're not sure, err on the side of applying. Don't err on the side of lying. Make sure you answer everything truthfully. But if you really don't know, maybe I'm eligible, maybe I'm not, apply and you will be, you know, you might be declined. You might get moved on, you might be declined. There is not a penalty for being declined. As long as you don't lie on any of the forms, it's not like somebody's going to accuse you of fraud because you misunderstood and apply. So definitely err on the side of applying. Also, though we can work with your application sometimes once it is submitted, if it's not submitted by the 31st at 5 o'clock, there's nothing anyone can do. They cannot extend the deadline. If you have an emergency, you know, if you're trying at 4 o'clock to submit, and you have a computer emergency, they can't call, you know, you can't call and they'll say, oh, we'll reopen it for you. You have to get your application in by 5 o'clock on the 31st. Okay, that seems to be happily the end of, oh no, one more. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, but I don't know. Okay. Nicholas, let me sort of close out everybody else and then I will talk to your specific question. Email us, ask me questions. Good luck. This is a, like I say, cumbersome, but not difficult. Compared to writing a bunch of narratives or you know, other processes, this is not a hard process. You just want to prepare yourself and be patient and understand that you're trying to make people understand your business. So make things as clear as possible. If there's something confusing you think about your financial statements, then include a note, put a PDF in with that document and explain it. You know, put yourself in the eyes of that reviewer and make their life as easy as possible. Thank you for coming and have a wonderful weekend and good luck on Monday and Tuesday or this weekend in putting in your application. So, Nicholas, if you're not sure if you applied for this grant, then as you have said, go ahead and shoot me an email. The things that I need for that is to know the legal name of the business. If you think that an application was applied, the email that would have been used and the owner's name, which in your case would probably be a signer, a board president, executive director, if your executive director is on there. But shoot me that email and I can put an inquiry in to L'Industrie to find out if in fact you did apply in the first round. You can also call the call center and try both approaches. I can put in a question while you also put it in through the call center. All right, thank you everyone. If nobody else has any other questions, then as I say, I wish you a wonderful, oh, nope, sent you an email. If we feel like our current NCE does not encompass all of our programs, should we still apply? Yes, Gabriella, there is a way to contact, if you feel like the NTE that is listed on your GuideStar does not accurately reflect your organization or does not completely, because you can have up to 3 NTE codes in your GuideStar listing, then you can, just like if there's a NAICS code on your taxes, you can amend your taxes, you can contact GuideStar and work with them to update your listing to put in an NTE code that you think more accurately reflects your organization. So you could go ahead and apply and use one of the eligible, and then go ahead and start getting your GuideStar updated. Because again, the worst thing that could happen is they're going to decline you. You're not going to be in trouble for fraud or something. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. Send me lots of emails over the weekend with your questions. And I wish you all luck. And I want to hear lots of great success stories once you get your grants and they help you continue on in what I know right now are incredibly difficult times. All right. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.